Yeah, I know. Oh, they should be. Yeah. But it's important, I think, that we do ask our parents questions. Questions we could ask our school leaders. How would you answer these questions? Do teachers in your school know and care about? See monitoring and target setting as an activity that they do? These are some of the questions you might consider for yourselves as school leaders if we're looking to evaluate how our school is performing. Some of the decisions we might need to make along the way. Do we have an appropriate curriculum? Are the teaching approaches appropriate? How do we go about motivating students? Or is that easy? Do we need to be more specific about individual students? There was that student that Richard mentioned this morning. What was his name? You remember the name? Yes, I know. Why do you remember the name? Because you're thinking of a sombrero and a gun. Does everybody have a Clint in their school? You've got a few of them? Yeah. We all do. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. We don't have long, so just a couple of minutes. When you go into a classroom and you see the quality of learning is high, not the quality of teaching, the quality of learning, what do you see? Just have a chat, make a list. What are some of the things that you see in classrooms where learning is happening? What are the judgments you make? Student learning or teacher learning, doesn't matter. What are some of the things you see? These were some responses that we got from some principals. Are these on your list? Is there anything that was on your list that's not up there? What else do you see? Okay, high level of student participation. Okay, thank you. Yes, you had something?
Urgency of learning.
Urgency. Okay, we need to learn. We have this focus, strong focus on learning. Anything else that you'd like to add to the list? In really good classrooms where learning occurs.
Quality of questions that stimulate student thinking.
Quality of questions. Excellent. Good questioning. Some of the things that we consider if we're looking at the quality of teaching and learning in a classroom. If we're moving around, we can look at these different areas that are associated with teaching and learning. Are there appropriate teaching methodologies going on? There's a little list there. Is the management in the classroom appropriate? Do we have a learning classroom? Is the atmosphere appropriate? And is the learning being displayed well? Now what we have there is something in italics. These are seen as being the most important aspects of that particular area. So if we're looking at displayed learning, the best way in which we show that is through student engagement. Students actively involved in what they're doing. If we're looking at the classroom atmosphere, we can make a judgment about that by looking at the interactions between the teachers and the students and the students and the students, the type of atmosphere that's generated from those. If we're looking at the management, is the management in the sense of challenging students, pushing them further, getting them involved and so on. And then if we're looking at a variety of teaching strategies as a way forward. Okay, these are some of the experiences which generate positive interactions. So if we ask students, how do you know when you're getting on well with the teacher? When the atmosphere of the classroom is really good, what happens? They're being able to ask questions. Now we've already had a comment that, you know, Pakistan kids don't ask questions. They're not really expected to ask questions. And what happens if they do in your classrooms? And that varies. You're getting used to it. Okay. So in your schools, questions are being asked. That's great. Okay. With the right answers, okay.
Then maybe the teachers that how to question.
Okay.
They really don't know what questions to ask.
But if the students ask a question, is the teacher expected to have the right answer? It's an unfair relationship if it doesn't work that way. We have to have right answers on both sides. Okay, this is negative classroom atmosphere. Now we wouldn't see this in Beacon schools. Not receiving positive feedback, being criticised, not getting encouragement, and favouring one student over the other. Very important issue in terms of things. 10% of students in the research that was done did not find schoolwork interesting. And so we have 10% automatically that probably are not learning what we want. We ask students about how do you learn best? What do you do? What are your approaches? How frequently do you do these things? And you can see that these are the major issues in how we learn best. These are the most important things that we can do for learning best. Listening, doing experiments, working on a computer and so on, working in a group. All of these are activities that we can test to see whether our classrooms are operating in a way that is appropriate, in the way in which we want to move forward. We also need to remember that students live what David Berliner calls nested lives, within circles, within circles, within circles. So a student and a young person is in a classroom, but the classroom is in a school, the school is in a community or a system and so on. And so we have these different levels of activity that are going on, and the further away from the student we are, the less likely we're able to impact on them. So, what are the contexts that you consider if you're doing a self-evaluation? What are the sorts of things we need to take into account? There is the family context, where the school is and who the parents are. There's a social and economic context, where the parents are on a socio-economic scale. There is a cultural context, and so people in Pakistan think differently to people in the United States. There is the global policy context, and that looks at a variety of things that are happening at the moment, including financial crises and everything else. And there's the school itself and what the school hopes to do. What we need to remember is that children are impacted upon by each of these different things. And when we look at the child, when we look at the student, we have to understand that all of these things have an impact on what that young person sees as being important. Now, we don't have 10 minutes, but what I'm going to do is we'll give you this out and we'll let you take it with you. So, what I have here is a list from Scotland. And what the list is are the measures that the Scottish Government wants when it's looking at school improvement. When it suggests that we want schools to undergo school self-evaluation, these are the sorts of things that the Scottish Government is asking people to consider. Now, what I was going to do was ask you to identify the ones that you think would be appropriate in your school. So which of those do you find interesting enough to consider asking questions about? How do we find out where we are on these particular things? Now, we don't have time to do that because we're actually out of time. The last thing that I want to talk about is whether or not you choose to seek external assistance. And what I'm looking at here is something that we could call a critical friend. And this might be somebody else in this room that you know and you trust and you would like to have as an external opinion. Somebody that is going to be positive but at the same time tell you the truth. An external person that is able to come in and look at what your school is doing with a different set of eyes than anybody else within the school can provide. And Fullan would argue this is a sign of vitality within the school, because the school is not afraid to be seen by other people. We have some schools that will advertise themselves in particular ways but don't want anybody else to really know what we're doing. A critical friend provides you with an opportunity to actually identify new ways of looking at your school. If I came into your school and I had this little checklist and I walked around your school and I just looked at what the school was doing, I looked at the pictures you had on the walls, I looked at the student paintings that you had up on your school, I could make a judgment about your school. In fact, it's interesting that as an external evaluator, as I was in Victoria and I'm working in Slovenia at the moment, as an external evaluator, I could make a judgment about your school probably within half an hour, and I would suggest I'd be pretty close to accurate. I wouldn't know all the specific details, but if you gave me the school records and I went away for a day and had a look at them, I could come back and I could provide you with an external opinion. And if we're looking at an external self-evaluation, it sometimes gives us ideas that we never thought of ourselves. Why? Because we're so busy doing it, we don't have the chance to step back as well as you might like. So I would ask you to consider the possibility of using somebody as an external person, somebody that you know and you trust, somebody that you feel has the expertise in the area, but somebody that you ask to give you an honest opinion. And I think from the notion of self-evaluation, the purpose of the activity, as we started today, it may well be that the purpose for doing it is because you have to. But what we would like to move towards is an understanding that you're doing it because you want to. Because the teachers, because the students, because the parents understand that this is the process that this school goes through on a consistent basis to make sure that it's at the cutting edge of whatever it can be, to make sure it's as good as it can possibly be. And we need to respect the fact that not all teachers are going to buy into this for a start, but we need to provide them with the right types of information so that they can understand why we're doing it and what the benefits will be. So I want to, I think, leave it there. If you want to talk to me further, I'm very happy for you to email me and ask me any questions or anything else that you might have. I apologise for the fact that I've sort of rushed through this. I thought I had another half hour where we could have a bigger interchange of questions and everything else. So if you need to ask me any questions, I'm happy to stay for a little bit longer and answer any questions. So thank you very much for coming.